Okay. See ya. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome to our last wine tasting of 2020, because of course the next two Friday nights are Christmas Day and New Year's Day. And welcome to our really, really fun sparkling wine and champagne tasting. Now, I do say the two different names because they are different things. Now, to a lot of folks, all sparkling wines are champagne and all champagne is sparkling wines, but actually both of those things aren't true. The region of Champagne does make wines that are still from Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and Chardonnay. I believe they actually make Aligoté white occasionally as well. But they also, the bigger issue is that there are so many different styles, so many different regions, so many different grape varieties that make sparkling wine that just saying, oh, well, it's all like champagne is wildly incorrect. So let's get a little bit of wine in our glasses, and we are going to start with the Rosé tonight. We're going to start with the Domaine Rosier Cuvée Maison. This wine is from Limoux, and I know it's probably weird that we're starting with the Rosé, but I have a very good reason for it, and that reason is that sparkling wine really does start in Limoux. Now, Limoux, can we jump over to map cam here, Aaron?
We may.
Thank you. I'm going to see if I can actually see on this thing from this angle. We're down here in the southwest. Limoux should be right around here, but I can't tell from the angle. I think I'm pointing at Limoux, but I'm not 100% sure. So, hey, there's Languedoc-Roussillon. Limoux should be just up here. Well, we're off to a roaring good start. Limoux is in here. I know it is. But for whatever reason, apparently tonight this is just not going to be my night. But regardless, Limoux is in the southwest. Limoux is one of the is the original region for sparkling wine, and that's why we're going to start with it. Now, the Champenois will tell you that champagne was the very first sparkling wine, and there are historical precedents for both stories. I did quite a bit of digging into this for this tasting. There are historical documents from 1531 that say that Limoux was making sparkling wine, not in this style, but sparkling wine. There are historical documents from the early 1600s that are much more generally accepted, that are very clear that Champagne had started making sparkling wine deliberately by that point. Now, every wine region has, at least in this point of history, unintentionally made sparkling wine. And I'll get to that in just a moment. But Champagne was probably the first region in the world to make a real living, a real focus of their wine region being sparkling wine. Limoux really has always made it, but until very recently, it wasn't an absolute focus of the region. Actually, for a very long time, in order to support the sparkling wine industry, they planted a whole bunch of Chardonnay, and it became really one of the very few places outside of Burgundy that you could get older Chardonnay vines to actually make still wine with that really did actually taste quite a bit like Burgundy, but it was for pennies on the dollar. You could get Limoux Chardonnay for like, $12, $14, and this would be, back in the 1980s and early 1990s. So how does one make a sparkling wine? Well, you have to find a way to put the bubbles in it somehow. I'm going to close this just for a second so I have my display bottles here. So let's start out with what I began talking about with Limoux. I said, well, the wine they made in Limoux in 1531 wouldn't have resembled in any real way the wine that we're tasting now, this Cremant de Limoux. Well, it would have resembled a great deal a Patnat or Pétillant Naturel, or I think if you really want to go back, you'll occasionally still see bottles labeled as Méthode Ancestrale. So we're going to go through in a minute the very complex way of making a modern, what they used to call Méthode Champenoise, what we now call Méthode Traditionnelle style sparkling wine. But pet nats are really having a hot minute right now, so I do want to actually talk about what makes a pet nat and why pet nat was the very first sparkling wine, because in a certain sense, it's the easiest style of sparkling wine to make. Now, with these, you're going to learn there's a very complex multi-stage process which involves riddling and aging and disgorging and starting with a still base wine and then adding some sugar to it and letting it carbonate, and it's this huge process. With pet nat, you basically start the wine fermenting to become a still wine like you would at any other point. And then as it approaches finishing the wine, you chill the wine down very, very cold to the point where the yeast stops being able to produce carbon dioxide and alcohol. And you chill it down so cold that that stops. And then you run it off into bottles and cap it. And then let it warm back up, the fermentation will start again and it will re-ferment in the bottle. Now, you have to be really, really careful on measuring how much sugar is left in that wine. I don't think our comments are going to work on the screen, Aaron. We'll see. I'm going to pull it up on here just in case, though. Oh, yeah? Oh, there we go.
I just got to help you.
Oh, you got to help me out. So the issue wasn't the technology. The issue was Aaron.
It's me.
Got it. Okay, good.
This time.
This time.
Most times.
Most times. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. So that's Pet Nat. Now, Pet Nat is really, like, this was a style that 5 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, like, when I, did my wine education, I was like, oh yeah, Pet Nat's a thing, or Method Ancestral is a thing, but you'll never see it. It's almost dead. It's going to be gone in 5 years. And then about 5-ish years ago, it absolutely started going bananas internationally. And now, I didn't do a count, but I'll bet we have 25 or 30 Pet Nats in the store in this just chill the wine down, bottle it, then let it re-ferment gently. Now, as I was saying, you have to be really, really careful with these, because if you get the sugar levels wrong when you rebottle it, it'll just keep fermenting to the point where it builds up enough pressure that the bottle literally explodes. And, as understandably, that could be a real problem. Where I was saying that, every wine region started out unintentionally making some sparkling wines, what I was talking about is that if you accidentally don't finish your fermentation, or especially in a couple of centuries ago, if it just got really, really cold outside when you were trying to ferment your wines, it could artificially chill the wine down to the point where it would stop fermenting and you'd accidentally make a Pet Nat. You end up with your Bordeaux or your Burgundy or your Châteauneuf de Pape or what have you, ending up sparkling effectively as a Pet Nat, which you didn't intend. So let's taste this Rosier, and then we will go through the traditional Méthode Traditionnelle way of making sparkling wine. Now, as I said, this is from Limoux. Blend on this is 10% Pinot Noir, 30% Chenin Blanc, and 60% Chardonnay. Now, Limoux does have their own native grape variety, which does have to be used in Blanquette de Limoux, but does not have to be used in Cremant. The grape behind Blanquette de Limoux is Mosaic. I really like Mosaic because it's really unique, like apple cider character. Some heavily Mosaic-based sparkling wines from this region, they can really come off almost like a wild ferment apple cider. They can be really, really interesting. Yeah, I love this stuff. Like, this is a $21 sparkling wine all day long, and I don't know. We're gonna go from a $20 wine to like a $25, and then we're gonna jump up to like a $65 bottle of sparkling wine.
Cool.
I don't know if you're gonna see the massive, massive price disparity. In one sense, I'm like, well, if we ever want to sell any of this again, I hope you see a big difference in the price. But part of me also says, in terms of how these are made, there isn't that big a difference. And I hope that you do actually see that you don't have to go to Champagne to get that, real Champagne experience. You can get it just about anywhere. Let's start with Limoux. So here is, in a nutshell, how you traditionally make a Méthode Traditionnelle or Champagne method sparkling wine. Pairing tonight with pizza and wings. Nice. That's actually one of my favorite pairings for sparkling wine. Sparkling wine does kind of drink like a beer because it's got that nice bitter or tart sourness. It makes a wonderful pairing with like greasy food. I actually really like that pairing. Okay, traditional method sparkling wine in a nutshell. You start out by making a base wine, but you don't make a base wine like you would be making a table wine. When you're making a table wine, you want to harvest at peak ripeness, maximize your sugars to a point, pick at the absolute pinnacle of phenolic ripeness to maximize character. You want the Chardonnay to be appley and pineapple-y and have beautiful like lemon and lime characters. You want your Pinot Noir to be bursting with cherry and mushroom and kind of that chicory bark, almost cinnamon character that Pinot can really come with. Not when you're making sparkling. Sparkling is, as much as the grapes can be important, it's very much more about how the wine is treated in the winery. The very subtle use of oak, the really heavy emphasis on autolysis, or the flavor of basically the dead and dying yeast cells as the wine's aging. We'll get into that in a moment. But you harvest the grapes of Champagne usually a little bit underripe to maximize acidity, so that the wine is bright and bracing and fresh and almost too acidic to drink in some cases, because when it undergoes the process of becoming Champagne, a lot of that's going to be necessary to keep the wine tasting fresh. You're going to put this wine through hell making it bubbly. So you have to start out with something that's going to stand up to that process. So you've got this base wine. It doesn't taste like a whole heck of a lot. You fermented it out to probably 10-11% alcohol. It's bright, it's fresh, it's bracing. It's not very tasty, but you've got a good baseline. Okay, well, what do you do with it from there? Well, you're actually going to bottle it, and you're going to put it into a champagne bottle like this. The glass is a lot thicker. Now, against like a standard wine bottle, the glass is about 1.5 times as thick, and it's purely to withstand that pressure. So the wine is finished fermenting. It will probably come off clear at this point, and you're going to add what's called liqueur de tirage, and that's going to be a fresh shot of yeast and some sugar. And that is what's going to carbonate the wine. So the wine is effectively finished. You're going to add this sugar and yeast to the wine. You're going to lay it down on its side, and you're going to let that wine age. Now, how long do you let that wine age? Well, in some countries, like the United States, Canada, Chile, Argentina, Australia, what have you, there's no regulations whatsoever. Champagne requires a minimum of 15 months, 24 months for vintage champagne. The same laws are actually applied to Cremant, which is the shorthand word that we use for any wine in France made by the Champagne method that comes from another region. So, Champagne is really its own region. It's kind of just lying outside of Paris by a little ways. It's geographically closest to Burgundy. But Cremant is, we make this wine like a Champagne, but we make it somewhere else. So you'll have Cremant de Bordeaux, Cremant de Loire, Cremant de Jura, Cremant d'Alsace. If you can think of a major French wine region, they make Cremant there. Now, that's not to say that you'll have like Cremant to like a small region. You would never see like Cremant de Pauillac or Cremant de Châteauneuf-du-Pape. That would be Cremant de Bordeaux or Cremant de Rhône. You very rarely see, even if it's a high-end estate, it will be the name of the broader region, not like a little tiny sub-region. So you've got this wine, it's aging in the bottle, it's sitting on its side, it's hanging out, but it's not sitting there quietly, it's not doing nothing. They're riddling the wine, which is to say the wine is sitting, historically speaking, it's sitting in basically a hole like this, angled slightly down, and the wine basically has now finished fermenting, but you've got a whole bunch of yeast solids. The yeast has reformed, it's now in the wine, it's created a sediment, but you have to get it out of there. Now, two things are happening. One, as that yeast is dying and almost beginning to break down in this wine, which is a process called autolysis, is beginning to give off flavors. Now, these are what we know as autolytic flavors. These are things like fresh bread, brioche, pie crust. Some people get like stinky feet. I often get Parmesan cheese. Some people will get things like Swiss cheese or even something into like mozzarella. It's a very distinctive note, and I don't get very much of it on the Cremant de Limoux here, partially because this is a rosé. I guess I get kind of like a dusty straw thing. Charcuterie board. Ooh, tuna steaks would be a good call. We now have the comments on a screen. Thank you, Aaron.
You're
Very well
welcome.
done. As much of a hard time as we gave you. And will give you. While we're talking about this riddling, so historically, it's sitting in the bottle like this. Now, how do you get this yeast sediment? Because you want it down at the neck of the bottle. You want it right down at the end so you can get rid of it so the wine's actually clear. Well, historically, someone would come along, literally called a riddler. That was their job. They would pull the wine out, give it a quarter turn, and then snap it back into place. And what that would do is it would cause the yeast to just gradually, slowly trickle its way down the neck of the bottle and eventually go down into the neck. And that would take about 6 weeks. But technology has actually moved on. I'm really glad that there's a picture of this in this book because it's a really fascinating piece of technology.
Maps.
Maps. It's not a map, it's a picture this time.
Picture.
Yeah. I dog-eared the thing, so of course that's why it's not showing it. There it is. It was 1 page too short.
Wow.
So this is what's called a gyro pallet. So it's got all the wines sitting in there, and as you can see, they're kind of sitting at that downslope angle. It will very slowly rotate them and just very gently wiggle them. And over about 3 days instead of 6 weeks, it will get that yeast down from inside the base of the wine all the way down into the neck so you can express it out. And that expression is the next stage. This step is known as disgorgement. And they basically take the wine, they turn it upside down, and they put it into a freezing solution. Usually this is a solution of some sort of liquid that's sitting about minus 15 degrees Celsius, and they effectively flash freeze the neck of the bottle, forming all that yeast that's sitting down in the neck of the bottle into a solid plug of frozen wine and yeast cells. Then, because these wines are at this point in their life cycle just sealed with a crown cap like a bottle of beer, they blow that off. The pressure in the bottle blows that slug of ice and yeast out the neck of the bottle, and now you've got a bottle of clarified sparkling wine that's been aging for about 15 months.
Crazy.
It's got all those really pretty autolytic yeast characters without any of the yeast left. Now, we now enter the really interesting question of sweetness and sparkling wine.
Get Kyle to do it for you.
Yeah, I'll pour for you. I was about to, and then Aaron just ganked the bottle there.
Sorry.
Let's get some wine for you folks. That is a terrible pour. That can be whoever's not watching. Nigel. There we go. That's Nigel's glass.
The entire world's watching.
Well, Nigel's not. There we go. That's better. So let's talk about sweetness in a wine.
Thanks, sir.
Now, it doesn't matter. Okay, let's leave out the Moscato d'Asti because that's made a different way. But if you're drinking a sparkling wine that's made in the method traditionnel or champagne method, all of the wines at this point are effectively the same dryness. They are all what we would now call Brut nature or extra brut, the driest of the dry. Now, there is a school of thought that says, well, we don't have to add anything at this point. The wine's good, it's done. If we're gonna add anything, we'll take one bottle and we'll top up another with it just to make up the missing headspace, and Bob's your uncle, we're done, put a cork in it, get it out the door. That's the driest of the dry grade. That's called extra brut or Brut nature. The next step up is, remember we started with that base wine? Well, it hasn't finished fermenting all the way because it hasn't gone through carbonation and tirage and everything else. Well, what if we just use that to top it up? That's known as Brut, and in very simplistic terms, that's usually the driest grade. Extra Brut or Brut nature is really, again, having a bit of a second renaissance right now, having a second life. This wasn't a style we even saw in the market 10 years ago, but now I'll bet it's half our champagnes. The next step up is extra dry, and this is the one that I really find challenging to sell as a wine merchant. It's like, well, I like traditional champagne, but I want something that's not so dry. And so I recommend them the wine that on the label says extra dry. Because traditionally speaking, it's the third step down. It's 2 below the absolute dry, so we are getting sweeter. Extra dry is most commonly seen on Proseccos. I actually grabbed an extra brut Prosecco, but most Proseccos you see will be extra dry. Then we get into dry, or very commonly on the label sec. It's a style we almost never see. I think I've seen one sparkling wine in the 20 years I've been doing this that was actually labeled as sec, and it's the Taittinger's Nocturne, which is a really interesting champagne. It's just it's kind of the shut up and play me the hits version of champagne. It doesn't have any challenging notes to it. It's just very light and pretty and very soft, and it's just very likable. I really like Taittinger Nocturne. It's by no means the most serious wine in the world, but it's just really lovely to drink. After that we have demi-sec, so half dry, which in terms of champagne still tastes pretty bloody dry, but if you have it side by side with an extra brut, you definitely see the sweetness. And then finally Milieu. So everything that is sweeter than like, okay, it's just barely not dry. Everything sweeter than that, all one category. Be it, Moscato d'Asti or a lot of your German sect or whatever. It's all just lumped in as, this is sweet stuff. And there's lots of really great sweet wines. There is Vouvrays that are done Milieu and sparkling. I will talk about this later on, but I absolutely love Moscato d'Asti. Even cheap, like $14 Moscato d'Asti, I really like it. There's a lot to be said about that. So you've now got this wine, and you're going to change the sweetness by adding varying levels of either finished wine or grape juice or heavily sweetened grape juice with a bunch of sugar in it, which we call rectified grape must, which is basically just grape juice that's been really boiled down to be very, very thick and very sugar dense. And then finally it's resealed with a cap and sold on. And that's a hugely complicated step. Couldn't someone make it easier? Yes, many people have, and we'll talk about that when we get to Prosecco. Do we have any questions yet, Aaron? Because I just
Questions? Just chicken and
Just
rice.
chicken and rice.
Burgers and bolts and
I like it.
charcuterie.
I like it.
Yeah.
This isn't going to be the most serious one,
pretty
though.
good.
It's good. It's just nice and light.
It's Christmas.
It's Christmas. And you wore your Christmas sweater, which is nice.
I wore my Christmas sweater.
You did.
I should show everybody eventually. I will.
Man, I like this. Do you like this, Aaron?
Love it.
Yeah, this is just
So pretty.
nice, like everyday sparkling wine.
Yeah. Delightful.
This is Brut grade. So this is the traditional driest, not the new driest, but you know, the old school driest grade. Okay, let's jump on a little bit and let's go over to Spain. We're going to go with the Aela Mirgin Cava. This is Brut Nature, so this is the new driest. Brut Nature, by the way, and Extra Brut, literally the same thing. Now, Cava's really cool. Color's totally different. So the first one was a rosé. This is a white sparkling wine. Now, in terms of fame, in terms of prestige, in terms of quality, I would say Champagne is by far and away number one. Among people who know, there's a bit of a fight between Cremant and Cava because Cava's been being made for a very long time. It's made in an almost identical style. In fact, in terms of everything except how long the wine ages on lees, the wine is identical. Like every other step is good except instead of 15 months aging on the lees, it's 9 months. And they use different grapes. Now, they do allow Chardonnay as one of the major Cava grapes. But they also use a lot of the 3 native varieties. The first major one is Macabeu, also known as Viura if you're in different parts of Spain. Beyond that, they use Xarel·lo, which is used in the lowlands where it's very, very hot, and Parellada, which is almost exclusively grown on mountaintops because it really likes the cold. And Spain is not a desperately cold country, but Parellada, because it can only be grown in very, very small sites and very hard to harvest sites, tends to be the smallest proportion of the blend, but that's not to say it's not one of the highest quality grapes. It's just really finicky about where it grows. It never grows anywhere cheap or easy to harvest. And we immediately get, despite the fact this is 9 months instead of 15, there's all of those autolytic characters that I get. Yes, there's apples, absolutely, but I get the Parmesan and the washed cheese rind. I get the dusty dryness, and I get the straw. I get all of the things I really like. What percent of production is sparkling by region? Ooh, so for Champagne, I'd say it's probably 98 or 99% sparkling. I have had a non-sparkling, 100% Pinot Noir, I believe by Mailly through the store. It took us 2 years to sell a 6-pack. It was a mistake bringing it in, but we wanted to try it because it was silly and we loved the idea. It was nice. It would taste very much like Northern Burgundian Pinot Noir. It was just really expensive. It was $60, and it actually came with like a champagne cork on the top, even though it wasn't sparkling. It was just a tough sell. For the region around Cava, I didn't look this up because Cava really overlaps with the broader region of Penedeth. We are over here on the east coast of Spain, so we are kind of down in the south on the bit that borders the Mediterranean, kind of looking east towards like Sardinia and Corsica. So it's very, very hot here, and Penedeth and Jumilla make a lot of like Garnacha and Monastrell wines that are very crowd-pleasing, very like bright, fresh strawberry and cherry, lovely everyday wines. There's a lot of bulk wine production in this part of the world. I want to say Cava there is 25 or 30, but that's a gut feeling, not something I actually read. And finally, in Limoux, well, for all of the various regions of France that do Cremants, like in Bordeaux, I'd be shocked if Cremant was more than 3 or 4%. In Alsace, I could see it creeping as high as 10%. In Limoux, actually, unusually, most of the wine production in Limoux, I'd say about 75 or 80%, is given over to sparkling. So that one really varies by region. Can I read the rest of Myra's comment, please, there, Aaron?
Oh, sure can.
3 bottles would have been a little much. Well, that is fair enough. I happily have 4 other people to help me drink them, so
about the savers?
Oh, the little wine closures? Yeah, those are really handy.
Those, eh?
Yeah, we do sell those. Okay. Notes on this for me. Apples immediately. Lemons and pineapples right after. Nice straw, dusty dryness. Nice earth. And the carbonation is very pretty. It's very soft. It's actually, I don't know if it's the shape of the glass, but this is actually softer than I remembered this wine being. Carbonation is kind of a sticky point with some people. Some people say, and this is one of the big complaints about Prosecco, which we'll get to in just one sec, carbonation, or as the Champagne folks love calling it, the mousse of the wine. The conventional knowledge is that, you know, smaller bubbles is better, more bubbles is better. The wine staying carbonated for longer, meaning the CO2 is better dissolved in the wine, is better. I don't know. Sometimes I like a very simple, coarse, frothy wine that has big kind of cola bubbles. I quite like that. Honey on the empty glass. All right. I'll be there in a minute. Actually, I get honey just off the wine even. That's a great note, Craig. Thank you. I would not have picked out honey without you. Now, I will say that Cava gets a little bit of a bad name because there was a lot of cheap Cava. They came in a frosted black bottle from a brand that rhymes with Rechenet. And honestly, I mean, that wine, more than anything else, I get the predominant like tasting note of Sunlight dish soap. It's very soapy, and I think that has given Cava as an industry a bit of a bad name. I don't think there's anything wrong with cheap Cava. I think Segura Viudas is like $12, $13 Cava is fine. I think Coroneu's $13, $14 Cava is fine. I don't know, just maybe it's the yeast they use at Frex, but it's just, it's never been my taste in Champagne, or pardon me, Cava. Does the glass make a difference for these? Yes. First time we've used a glass that wasn't basically the exact same shape in this. I wanted to use a champagne flute, because it's Christmas and it's nice. And when I was going through them, I was very picky. I like a slightly tulips glass, and that basically makes me from the 1950s. I don't know why. Maybe it's because it reminds me of like the beer glasses that I'm used to for really tasting beer critically. I get more out of this really archaic, not at all in fashion tulip shaped champagne flute than I do out of the more traditional ones. I don't like the saucers, the really old school 1920s champagne saucers. I think those just ruin the carbonation very quickly. Can I make champagne with a yellowtail and a soda stream? Yes, you can. And actually, okay. Now there, Aaron, there is our segue into Prosecco. How many times have we tasted wine from North Italy and not tasted Prosecco? Well, here's our chance to again not taste it, but we'll at least talk about it. So, okay, it is not it is not the same as putting yellowtail into your soda stream, which I actually tried. My wife had a soda stream there for a while, and I actually did try making my own sparkling wine out of a not desperately interesting bottle of New Zealand Sauv Blanc, and it ended up being sparkling cheap Sauv Blanc. I think I just went out and bought beer. It was not a desperately successful experiment. But let's talk about Prosecco. And I do give Prosecco a really, really hard time, and to a certain point, unfairly so. This happens to be an excellent Prosecco that I actually happily drink. Our recommended sparkling wine up at the counter as our like kind of inexpensive bubbles for New Year's for everyone at $14. That's basically Prosecco. It's declassified Prosecco also by Giusti. Prosecco is made in the Lake Garda region. So we are northwest of Venice in the same part of the world where they make Soave and Bardolino and Valpolicella and Terre de Dolomiti. We're not that far away from the Alto Adige. There's just tons and tons of more interesting wine regions in this part of the world. But all of the sparkling wine production in this part of the world is given over to a grape variety called Glera. And Glera is the grape behind Prosecco. What makes Prosecco different isn't the grape variety. It's not that, oh, well, Prosecco is made with Glera and Champagne is made with Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. That's not the main difference. It's how it's made. So we've already broadly covered how you make Champagne. So you start it with a still base wine. You put it into the bottle with a little bit of yeast and a little bit of sugar. You let it age for a few months. When it's done aging, you chill. After you riddle it a bit, you chill the neck of the bottle in some ice. You blow the yeast plug out. You top it up with some stuff to determine the sweetness. You throw a cork in it and you sell it. Prosecco does it a different way. For them, they will generally finish the wine to a base fermentation, just like they would with champagne. So you end up with a light, fresh, clean, very acidic base wine. But rather than doing in-bottle re-fermentation, they'll do it in a steel tank. It now has, and this is one thing I have an issue with modern wine education, it used to have the name Charmat method, which was lovely. It was named for the guy who invented it. It had a couple hundred years of history. If you didn't think about it too hard, it had a very romantic name. Now we call it the tank method. That's better. Great. Yay, tank method. Anyway, so they take this finished wine, they pour it into a stainless steel tank that's very easily temperature controlled, so they can exactly decide what temperature the fermentation is going to happen. They add that liqueur de tirage, that sugary solution with the yeast. They allow it to recarbonate in the tank. Then, just like with a pet nat, they chill it down quite cold and then bottle it under pressure into the bottles while filtering off the yeast. So there is no riddling, there is no aging on lees unless you want to age on lees in the tank, which kind of isn't really the same thing. Just because your yeast to liquid level is different. This is something we cover a lot when we talk about whiskey, and we talk about things like quarter casks. So your square inches of wood exposure per liter of whiskey, the higher that number is, the more the whiskey is going to age faster and taste woodier. Same thing with bottle fermentation versus tank. In a giant steel tank, you don't have enough square inches of yeast lees to liter of wine to really get those proper autolytic characters. Jancis Robinson in the Oxford Companion to Wine here, she actually compares wine made by this method to being the closest thing to still wine made sparkling in terms of its taste qualities as any other out there, because it's made in a quality method. This isn't the same as just taking your yellowtail and putting it in the soda stream. There is a real process and a method to doing this. But in terms of how it presents, there aren't those autolytic characters, there isn't that long-term aging on the lees, there isn't a lot of the other things. This really does taste like Glera, but make it sparkling, if that makes sense. Can we scroll up a little bit so I can get some more of the comments?
Sure can.
Thank you, Aaron. Just blow bubbles with a straw. Scroll on down there, Aaron. Let's get the rest of it. Maybe add sunlight. Well, you could add sunlight to this, and then it would taste almost like freshenette, except the freshenette would taste more like sunlight. So, yes, that is Cava. And Cava, to me, is one of those really great values out there. If I'm looking for a bottle of sparkling wine and I'm just going to put orange juice in it on Christmas morning, I'm almost invariably going to buy a Cava. Not because Cava particularly lends itself to orange flavoring or anything. It's just going to be the best quality sparkling wine out there that's made in the champagne method. Even $12 freshenette is made in the same method as all of these. It has to. It uses the word Cava on the label. You can't make it in a tank. You can't make it in a soda stream. You have to re-ferment in the bottle. And if you can get that for $13 and you can put your orange juice in it, what more do you really need?
How much is this bottle?
These guys I think are 23 or 24 on the shelf.
Yeah.
Ginger is an interesting note.
Did you see? Oh, you didn't see that. Just a sec. Oh, you did. Deirdre? Yep.
The second one feels so bubbly, hard to get the flavors. Interesting. I actually was thinking that this had maybe a little more coarse carbonation, but not more. I think this is kind of that mousse characteristic the French are saying with the smaller bubbles. Cava, because it doesn't get that extra 6 months of on-lees aging, the bubbles do tend to be a little bit coarser.
Huh. That's what that is. It's distracting.
It's a little distracting, isn't it? Yeah, I don't notice it so much because I'm talking and kind of swirling the wine around as I talk.
As soon as she said it, I noticed it. Just got a mouthful of bubbles.
I'm just going to quickly go back to this to see if I notice that the Limoux is a lot softer. Oh yeah, anyone who hasn't finished this already, and I hope that's most of you, do go back. That is shockingly different. Deirdre picked it up, kind of going from the soft to the hard. I think it's even more stark going from the Cava back to this, just how much softer the Rosier is. I think it's time, Aaron. I think it's time for champagne. The real champagne.
Hooray!
We're 40 minutes into our champagne tasting. We're actually going to taste the champagne.
Oh, wait, we gotta... Just wait, you gotta get this... Okay, well, he'll do it himself.
He'll do it himself. He's not going to wait. Oh, there's that nose.
Just wanted to show you. This is how you pour. Oh.
This is... Yes!
This is how you
This
pour.
is how you pour. Thanks.
That's right.
Well, the first one was right.
Uh-huh.
Got you on camera.
Saying that? Thank you. Thank you, Aaron.
Saying that and him blowing the pour.
That's beautiful.
That's really important.
That is the most important. It's a Christmas miracle.
Glad I could be of service.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. All right. So, this is by Pierre Gimonnet. Pierre Gimonnet is one that we've been carrying for about 5 years now. It's not something we have on the shelf all the time. We probably have it about 7 months out of 12, just because they don't make very much, and they also, for people in the know, it's very much one that's in demand. I love this wine. Part of the reason that some of you at home have the Philippe Nat, we were able to order lots more of this, but we tried to order another 3 6-packs of the Pierre Gimonnet and only got 2. And for those of you who do have the Philippe Nat at home, don't let me forget, I will walk you through your wine as well. So, Pierre Gimonnet here. A few things on the label of note. This is what's known as a grower champagne. So generally speaking, we differentiate our champagnes into 2 categories. There are the big houses. These are people like Mums and Piper Heidsieck and Veuve Clicquot and Taittinger and what's the giant? Oh, Moët and Chandon. You know, the world's largest champagne house that I completely neglected to mention. Those are the big houses, and there's about 6 or 7 of them in total. And they, in terms of the at-home domestic market, they really do take up like 95% of it. Smaller grower champagnes like Pierre Gimonnet, and even smallish growers like Philippe Nat, they do tend to take up a very small percentage of the market, and that's because they just don't have the marketing power, and they also don't have enough wine. I'll talk about a little bit about that in a minute, but there's a couple other things I want to talk about here as well. The first thing is that this is Brut, so it is the traditional dries, so they've added the base wine back as the dosage. It's also Blanc de Blanc, so this means white wine made of white grapes. Now, all champagnes are made of some combination of Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. There are some houses that specialize in one or another. There's a champagne house here, Christophe Mignon. He specializes in Pinot Meunier. He doesn't do anything except Pinot Meunier in his wines, period. Blanc de Blanc, at least as far as champagne is concerned, is of the 3 grapes that are allowed to be used in champagne. Only, one of them's white, and that's Chardonnay. The other 2 are red grapes. So a Blanc de Blanc, a white made from whites, means that this must be a wine made 100% from Chardonnay. Pretty simple. Blanc de Noir, the opposite. So this is a wine from Champagne. It's a white wine made, and not a rosé like this, made exclusively from red grapes, so from Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. The other thing that's really of note here, is it even on the front label on this one? It's not. It's actually, I have to go back to the back label, and it says Cuvée Premier Cru. Now, in the rest of France, a vineyard itself would be declared to be Premier Cru or Grand Cru or what have you, based on where it is. That's not actually how it works in Champagne. Most Champagne grapes are put up for auction by the ton, or in some cases by the half ton for very desirable vineyards. Basically, if you qualify in the bottom 85% in terms of total auction price per ton, your fruit's not Premier Cru or Grand Cru. It's just standard old champagne. And that includes a lot of really famous wines. Le Grand Dame by Veuve Clicquot, I don't think has ever managed even Premier Cru. Dom Perignon is famously not even Premier or Grand Cru. Most of the big prestige champagnes, especially the ones made in quantity, Cristal, very famously, is not Premier Cru. They just make do with kind of the bottom 85%. So these are not the most famous sites. They're not from the parts of the champagne that, they will chemically test a lot of the grapes. So they'll know going in what the sugar levels and what the acidity levels are. They'll know the quality going in. So if it's not in the bottom 85%, but it's in that 86 to 95% of the total auction price, those are your Premier Crus. So they're buying not the absolute best fruit, but within the top 15% of fruit that was harvested that year. That makes it a Premier Cru. Grand Cru is the last 5%. And that's how the cru system in Champagne works. And this is Premier Cru. So we're dealing with really, really top flight fruit. Again, a reminder, this is like $65 and a bottle of Dom is 200 and change, which isn't Premier Cru, and it's also not Blanc de Blanc. Just putting that out there, no judgment on Dom. Dom can be very nice. Not young, but it can be very nice. So, this is Pierre Gimonnet et Fils. This is a small village grower. In total production, they probably make a few thousand bottles, no more than 10,000 usually. Oh, and in the mouth. There's just so many things going on, and I really love that. Cheese rind, but you have the Philippinat. So let's talk about the Philippinat. Philippinat is another small grower. I believe in terms of size, they are very slightly larger than Pierre Gimonnet. The big claim to fame for Philippinat is the Clos d'Igoise. So let's talk a little bit about how those vineyards in Champagne work. In most cases, Pierre Gimonnet as a winery might own a few of its own vines, but broadly they're buying most of their grapes at auction. Part of the reason, and this is partly why it's unfair to take shots at companies like Moët Chandon or like at Dom Pérignon, is that they own their own grapes. They own their own vineyards. So a lot of the grapes that they grow would never go to auction, so they can't actually qualify for that auction price system. Now, let's say you have a very famous field like Coburn's Vineyard. This is a very famous site. It's been in the Coburn family for 9 generations. We own this. Well, you manage it. You manage that site. But Taittinger owns 2 rows, and Philippinat owns 5 plants, and Pierre Gimonnet owns 3 plants, and let's say Veuve Clicquot owns 3 rows, sort of thing. So nobody actually owns a whole vineyard. There's one of the most prestigious, incredible vineyards in all of Champagne. Some might even say it's the most famous of them. It's called the Clos d'Igoise. And it's the only vineyard that's famous in all of Champagne that's a monopole or monopoly. One winery owns the entire vineyard, and that's Philippinat. They own the Clos d'Igoise. And we occasionally tried selling Clos d'Igoise. The issue with this is it's a case of 12, and it takes me a while to sell 12. It's usually about $20, $30 more than Dom Pérignon, so it puts it on the shelf around $270. Clos d'Igoise is simply magical in a good year. It takes a couple of years to open up, but when it does, it's just one of the most ephemeral, delicate, teach you things about Champagne, teach you things about Chardonnay wines I've ever had. Philippinat also famously does not use a whole lot of Chardonnay in its wines. Most of its wines are exclusively based in red. I believe the Philippinat that you'll have at home should say Blanc de Noir. I don't have one in front of me, so I can't say. But if they're not 100% red grapes, they are mostly red grapes, and specifically mostly Pinot Noir. But that very delicate, soft carbonation that just, you get so much more out of the wine because the bubbles aren't distracting. The carbonation is there, and if I was to leave these wines all at the same level and just go home for the night and come back in the morning and pour myself 3 fresh glasses, I would bet that these 2 would be demonstrably a lot flatter. I bet this would look very similar to that just because it takes so much less. I'm glad Deirdre liked that. My terrible, terrible explanation of the very, very convoluted politics and land ownership disputes and plant ownership disputes. And to get, if you've got a field that's not a very big field, it's maybe 2 hectares at most, and 30 different people own a piece of that field. How do you agree on how it's fertilized, how it's sprayed, if it's sprayed, who goes in and does the cuttings? Do you send each your own team, or do you all go together on a cutter you trust? When does everybody get the right to go in and harvest? How do you know that people aren't coming in and maliciously damaging your vines out of spite or competition? It's really this amazingly partially cooperative, partially competitive system where the reason the auction system has become so big is it's if none of us own the grapes, none of us are going to screw up each other's grapes, and we can all buy them at auction, and no one knows which grapes are going to get sabotaged that way, and therefore no grapes get sabotaged. Yeah, 65 Pinot Noir, and you'll see that through the whole Philippe Pinot range, right from the Philippe Pinot base wine right up to the Clos de Gouaz at 270. So yeah, Pinot Noir is what he does. And that's something we're starting to see more and more and more. Apart from Blanc de Blancs and Blanc de Noirs, you really didn't see grape varieties expressed much on French wine labels. And part of that is the emerging North American, Japanese, and particularly Indian markets where they really want to know what's in the bottle. And that, again, has come out of Japan's wine market being, yes, very French influence and very European influence, but also very heavily influenced by the American wine market, where varietal was first and foremost. So what is this? It's a Cabernet. Okay, well, where's it from? That order of questions. What is it? First it's a Cabernet, then it's a Bordeaux. Same thing with India, because the very first wines that really went big in India were Australian wines because of the closeness of the market. And again, they're all labeled as Shiraz or Cab or Grenache or what have you. And there's a lot of New Zealand Sauv Blanc as well. So that idea that the biggest export markets in the world know the variety first and the region second has led to a lot of things like, 25 years ago, seeing 65% Pinot Noir actually declared on the label. Heck, having the grape varieties Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier declared on the label was madness. You'd never see that. No, that was for Americans and peasants. You didn't see that on a champagne label. In fact, actually, all of the ones I have in front of me, this does say Pinot Chardonnay Chenin. I did get the percentages off the website, mind. That was freely available. The Mirgin Cava, I know the grapes that have to be in it. Do they actually say? No, they don't. And because it's a white Cava, I'm going to assume there aren't any red grapes in it, although there certainly can be. Pinot Noir is allowed in Cava. Grenache is allowed in Cava. I think Monastrell is. There's one other red grape that's a native Spanish grape that's not coming to mind. But you can use red grapes in Cava. But the big ones are Chardonnay, Charello, Parellada, and most importantly, Macabeu. But yes, you do see that. Can you scroll up a little bit, Aaron? I saw we got two comments right back to back, and I can only see Craig's. Can you just scroll up for me a bit? They also are just better. Yes, Devin's not wrong. Champagne does have a certain je ne sais quoi to them. They do. Deirdre asks, do these sparkling wines taste? They do taste, but Aaron should probably scroll down.
Oh, sorry.
Do they taste poorly if not carbonated? Yes, they do. And this goes back to my original point about the base wines being kind of acidic messes when they were very first made. They were not made to be table wines. They were made to be entirely something else. As a result, when they do lose their carbonation, they lose one of the major structural components that's making the wine taste the way it does. Dissolved carbon dioxide is actually acidic, so it's part of what's giving the wine life and energy and freshness. When that CO2 does completely come off the wine, along with the bubbles, it will take away some acidity and freshness and life. And also, the wine wasn't designed, like from the very first day when it was harvested from the vineyard, what grapes they planted, where they planted them, how they treated the vines. Literally from the day they put shovels in dirt and started planting these vines, they were designed to be a sparkling wine. To try and drink it still, you can, but you're not really going to get much of a result out of it. Did Cristal sales tank after the nasty comments about hip-hop, or did it really not matter? Considering how hard Cristal still is to get, I would suggest not. So for those of you who don't know, I think, and Devin can fact check me on this, I think for every 3 cases of 6 of the Louis Roederer base wine, Cristal is the top of the line from Louis Roederer, just like Dom Perignon is the top of the line from Moët and Chandon.
Is that an old dirty bastard reference?
I don't know.
Say that.
Was it an old dirty bastard reference? Aaron does have to know. He's dying to know. So anyway, no, I still have to buy 3 6-packs of the Louis Roederer base wine to every 3-pack of Cristal I get. So that was the same 10 years ago as it is now. So I would suggest, at least on my side, no, it's just as scarce and hard to get as it was before. Aaron is always up on the latest hip-hop news.
Or Kevin. I'm not really. Kevin might be though. I wouldn't put it past Kevin.
I wouldn't put it past Kevin either. And again, I have lots of help to finish 3 bottles in one night, so I'm not going to finish anywhere close to 3 bottles, but I have lots of happy elves to help me.
It's old news, he says.
It's old news. So, questions. Wow, that was a really fast 55 minutes. Where the heck did the
crazy.
time go? I feel like I've been up here 20 minutes. Okay, questions, comments, rankings, this sort of things. You do find the wine very different from the first time. The acidity and the nature of the wine changes. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I wasn't sure. Like, I have had tastings like this. Maybe if I had done like a Cremant de Jura or something that had more autolytic character, maybe we'd had more of a comparison. To a certain point, like, champagne just has something. And these are made in the exact same way. You know exactly how they're made now. There is just something to champagne, and in this lineup at least, I'm inclined to agree with that. 1, 3, 4? Well, Deirdre's cut off. There are not 4 wines tonight. When do I serve sparkling? When do I serve sparkling? I really like sparkling wine, oddly enough, as a palate cleanser in the middle of a tasting or the middle of a dinner. I wouldn't use real champagne for that. But I really like it when I'm especially doing like a serious wine dinner with people. Very often, like, if you've ever been to one of these and they're like 6 or 7 or 8 courses and they're all paired with wine, and you know, the sommelier, and I'm guilty of this as anyone, they're really trying to show off. So they're trying to, like, they're probably like taking less of a cut on the wine. They're just trying to, like, this is amazing, you need to have it, and the chef's doing everything they can. You just get so damn palate fatigued. Having a chance to be like, what's the course now? A glass of ice water and a glass of champagne. Take 10 minutes, guys. I really like it for that. That just interrupt palate break. It's lovely. I also really like champagne with some very particular foods. I like champagne actually with really trashy meals. We were talking about this, I think, during the beer tasting. I really like champagne served almost in the place of a beer because of sour bitter confusion, where you'd serve like, hey, here's like an IPA. We're gonna have it with like hot wings and pizza. Put a champagne in that place, it will almost work as well. It's also the natural pairing with oysters. Oysters and champagne are absolutely classic. I love champagne because of that high acid palate cleansing effect with like high fat cheeses, especially like some of your blues and your very, very soft cheeses that have a lot of wild yeast components. Are very, very aromatic. I like champagne as like a palate cleanser in between. What about Key Royales? How about this? The only type of jam or jelly, and I have both in my fridge, is currant. I have a red currant jam and a black currant jelly. I love currants. And creme de cassis is the fruit behind, or currants are the fruit behind creme de cassis. And what's a Key Royale? It's sparkling wine and creme de cassis. It's just blending 2 things I already love together. So yeah, I absolutely love that. Do I mix with liquor? Yes, there is a cocktail I really, really like, which is called a French 75, which is sparkling wine, gin, fresh lemon juice. You can also float neat things on it. You can float like elderflower liqueur or limoncello on top, and then you can sweeten it with sugar to your taste. That's a fabulously good cocktail that gets you incredibly drunk incredibly quickly, because there is 3/4 of an ounce of gin and a full glass of champagne in there, plus a little bit of lemon and, you know, whatever else you want to float on top. So you certainly can.
You can have 3.
You can have 3.
That's it.
And then you can have a nap. Yes.
Yeah.
Do we have any other comments that I might have missed? Maybe some rankings?
No, I don't think so.
No? Okay, good.
You haven't missed anything.
Aaron, what's your ranking?
I agree with somebody here. 312. Thank you very much.
312.
312.
Nice.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Who was that? Oh, 312. That was Kevin's. Yeah, I agree with Kevin.
Don't I have a fourth I just have to walk people through? No, I don't, because it's been an incredibly long week. No, I'm very, very tired. It's been a long day.
Wild, like, tangent thing? Like,
Well, actually, I was
that you want to show people?
actually I was going to put you on the spot.
Why?
So we've been asking people their favorites.
Mhm.
You've been here for every single event we've done.
Yeah.
What's your favorite event we've done so far? What was your favorite tasting?
Oh. Thanks for asking. It's the ones that are the worst.
Yes.
It's the ones that are the most off the rails. All the things.
All
like,
the things
hands
is the one
down.
that comes to me too.
Yeah,
Yes,
all
the
things
the
is-
collective arts
Oh
tasting.
yeah, and I think everyone can like look forward to like a greatest hits coming out sometime soon of like. You know,
Good,
the
because
best of the
we do
worst.
need one.
The
We
best of
need
the
we need
worst.
Mike telling us how to pour in there too. I just got flipped off really hard.
What's the alternate wine?
There is no alternate wine. Oh, there's no alternate wine tonight. No, we're just doing the three.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, the Philippinat. Yes. Well, I'm not tasting the Philippinat because literally we sold all of the bottles of Philippinat to people because, yeah, we got really shorted on the Gimonnet, which means we're probably not going to have Gimonnet again for 6 months because Gimonnet is just never in stock.
Is there anything that people should try to get their hands on for the holiday season before you kind of close up shop for next week?
Well, I mean, we're open until the 5 on the 24th,
Right,
and I am
yeah.
going to Calgary tomorrow.
Yeah.
There is a Cava beer I can't talk about yet.
Okay.
But we are going to get super duper saturation again. So we'll have 5 saturation variants on the shelf. We'll have super sat, super duper set, and then the 3 single sats.
Are the Blind Man Stubbies gone?
Blind Man Stubbies are gone for now, but we will be reordering those.
Yeah.
Oh no, Mike, why don't you show us how to pour? Do you want to get a close up there, Aaron?
Are we gonna do
Yeah, we're-
side by side? You know, we're
Oh, a
both
side by
Oh, a
side.
side by
Wine
side?
pour.
All right, fine.
Wine pour down. Just wait, don't pour yet. Hold on. Oh, I guess you need to pour. Okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Wine pour down?
Wine pour down.
Oh, but you got the right glass.
Doesn't mean I'm not going to screw it up.
No, we're both pretty inept actually.
I want a little head on mine.
All right.
Neither was a good pour. Everyone loses.
You all failed.
we didn't tilt the glass.
We didn't tilt the glass. That is rather the secret.
Come up with excuses.
The Cava beer is coming for Sunday. One of them I can't talk about till Monday, so it will be on the shelf Monday because that's when Cabin's releasing it. But the Super Duper Set will be on the shelf for Sunday. 3 new beers from Annex, Pity Party, whatever the heck they're calling their Imperial Stout, and one other. And nothing new from 88. And just top up some establishment. Oh, pardon me, not just top up some establishment. Eric Dick's new beer label.
The art.
The art, yeah.
Oh
Eric,
my God.
our like
I'm gonna find it.
our like amazing commenter premier, Eric Dick, has his second establishment label coming down with us for a 750ml beer from establishment on Sunday. So that'll be exciting. Oh, thank you, Melissa. That's very nice of you.
Oh, that's not how you spell Instagram.
How does the champagne in the Christmas case compare? Well, it depends which Christmas case you got, because there are 4 that actually have a real champagne, because we ran out of, it's been a real year of running out of things, because, you know, international shipping is completely screwed by COVID. Of the 16 we did, 12 have a Cremant de Rhône by Alain Vosges, which is, I think, unquestionably the best sparkling wine made in the Rhône Valley by miles. It's an absolute stunner of a wine. The other 4 are the Tendel and Lombardy Blanc de Noir Champagne, which is a really nice champagne. I actually think in that case, again, side by side, haven't tasted them. I think, you know, in a vacuum, I probably would say I prefer the Alain Vosges, but I mean, the Tendel Lombardy was substantially more expensive, so it's not like you got shorted if you got that one. But yeah, I would probably take the Alain Vosges.
I have Eric's artwork to deploy here.
Yeah, deploy away.
Do you know what beer it's for?
I don't remember the name of it.
Okay, let me just find out real quick.
Thanks. And Merry Christmas to you, Deirdre. Thank you. And when do we start beer tasting? We will be back between Christmas and New Year's, so I believe that's December 30th. We're not doing a shameless promotion corner for 2 reasons. One, it's the champagne tasting, Christmas tasting. I didn't want to do any that felt too shameless, even for shameless promotion corner.
They won't tell us, but they will show us the art. So we'll do that.
Okay, let's do
I'm
that.
fading it in right now. There it is. It's really cute. It's about the 2013 flood,
Okay.
and Eric and his wife's experience with that. So anyway, go
That
check
is
it
very
out.
fun. Yeah.
Look for it.
Wonderful.
There you go.
I think that's a lovely place to close this out, Aaron.
Good. Yeah.
Let's call that a wonderful night.
Real nice.
You know, I think we're done for a week. You and I will see each other again on the 30th for beer tasting.
Right on, man.
We don't know what we're doing yet, but we'll do something. We'll announce it. I would expect we'll announce that on the Wednesday before Christmas. We'll announce what the heck we're doing.
Cool.
We're probably not shooting a promo, so we'll just leave that to you to create something.
Next Wednesday.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Well,
sounds good.
we'll come up with something,
Yep.
probably. And if we don't, well, we'll pull something together off what we have in stock. We've never done that before.
Pull a party out
Yeah.
of our ass. Yeah.
Yeah, we've certainly never just forgotten to order the beer for a beer tasting, pulled one completely out of our ass before. That's never happened. No, all right. Thanks, everybody. I think we'll call that a night. Merry Christmas to all of you, and thank you all so much for joining us for 9 months of insanity. It's been a lot of fun.
So much fun.
Thanks, Phil. Good night.